right, good day, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Masterclass with Kunle Afolayan. In the last episode, we discussed quite a number of interesting things. It was dedicated more to sound, field sound, and also post sound for film and television. This episode, we're going to be dealing with the role of an editor. What does editing entails, and what does color correction and grading, what does it entail? Let's go on this break, and when we come back, we'll go into details. These days, you can, on your phone, there's so many applications that, you can download, and it allows you merge images, and they also allow you merge videos. And you can then also sync sound with your images and video. So that makes you an editor. But for film, it's a bit different. It's a bit different because you have to be deep. You have to understand what storytelling is all about. You also need to understand the art of storytelling and a lot more. It's beyond just merging images and just merging videos. For example, on the shoot of the figurine, I think I worked with like 2 editors, in fact 3 editors on that shoot. What makes figurine a bit different was the fact that, yes, digital technology came not too long before we shot. And a lot of times people shoot, and after shooting, a lot of people were not really doing color correction and grading. And most times the sound is pretty much what is shot on set, and you just put it on one small computer and you just merge everything together. And also the kind of cameras that was introduced at that time were also different. Like I said, we treated this, I think, when we were talking cinematography. The camera we used for the figurine, which was the Sony EX3, had 3 layers to it. And the back side of the camera is what deals with the IT, just like a lot of cameras that you see today. What is IT? IT, because that is where you put the slot card, all the cards that record the footage. And when you remove those cards, you need a computer to be able to download the cards. And you deal with all of this in different ways. And you cannot run most of those cameras. And before, it was completely different. You had nothing. You don't use computer until you get to the post-production stage. But in this age and time, it's a completely different ballgame. So anybody who is going to be an editor must be someone who understands computers, and you also need to understand the new technology. Most of this technology, or most of these equipment that are introduced now, they usually will have, because they get changed like every 3 months. So every 3 months, they come up with a new feature. If you buy a camera 3 months ago, and this month you're buying another one, they will introduce something that, will be inviting enough for you to want to get the latest, camera. No camera has the real 35mm sensor. So for you to do that or achieve that, you had to get the latest adapter. I think there's another company that happened to also be doing the same kind of adapter for 35mm film. So as an editor, you need to understand all of these things. I'm not an editor, but you know what? Because of the fact that I've interacted with all of these equipment, most of them I purchased myself, and before buying them, I read a lot about them. I meet with cinematographers, even when they're not working with me or we're working together on the same project, and I study them. And I will only go for them if I think they're going to offer me something that is different from what I have done before. And I find it a bit surprising that a lot of the editors that we have these days, number one, they don't read the script. They get footage from the director or the producer, they dump it on their table, and then they start cutting. It's also surprising that a lot of editors, a lot of films, are edited without the director's, on set. For me, it's a bit different. A lot of times I allow the editor to do their cut, and then I come in, look at it, and then, give my own input and all of that. That is a bit different from the director's cut. In my case, it's different. It's difficult for an editor to completely edit a feature without my input. And this is not a case of maybe not believing in the editor or anything. If I don't believe in you, you won't even work with me in the first place. But I think it's more of a case of who is the storyteller. And then as an editor, are you telling the story the way it is written in the script, or you're using your imagination and skill to rearrange some scenes, in a way that it helps and enhances, the style of storytelling. These are some of the things that, for me as a director, I pay a lot of attention to. But let's go on break. When we come back, we'll go into more details. Earlier I was talking about the fact that a lot of the cameras we have now, they are film camera, but they also have the digital side to them is directly in sync with using computer and all of that. And this is where workflow comes in. If you want to start a project, for example, depending on the kind of resolution you're looking to achieve, then in 2009, I don't think there was no 4K. I think everybody was pretty much shooting 1080. You have to have like hard drives and then have enough memory card to record, your materials. And the editor needs to be on set. In this age and time, because of the digital world, unlike before, those who used to edit on film, it was a completely different thing. It was negative, and of course they print and then they start merging manually and all of that. That is for film. But for digital, you have to learn how to first label your drives, label the cards, and then you need to also understand the size of the drives you're supposed to use, depending on the resolution, that you want to shoot. If, for example, you're shooting 4K, and then maybe in a day, you are probably doing 5 hours of shoot a day, then you have to know that you can't have anything below, let's say, 2 terabytes a day. And also, if you really want to be safe, for you to be safe, you need to have like 3 different copies. You have one, you have like 2 backups, just in case anything happens to any of your material, then you can fall back to the backups that you already have. But for figuring, the technology was not as advanced as what we have now. Then we weren't doing 4K, so our data was not as high as what is obtainable now. So we still managed to, and then the hard drives that they were doing, 1 gig hard drive was this big. So you have to have maybe 10 of those big 1 gig hard drive. Unlike now that you can even have 10 terabytes, in just one drive. So data, technology, everything is changing. The workflow for figuring wasn't as difficult. As a matter of fact, we had just one laptop, a small MacBook Pro, and that was what we were using to, of course, capture and all of that, on set. And then when we were editing, I remember at some point I actually took edit to my house, and I had the editors living in my house. And wake up, eat, edit, and then sleep. And then I realized some things were some shots were missing. And then I invited one sound guy that time. I wanted to test if he will have the time to do the sound, and he came. And I remember he slept in one of the rooms in my house. So everything was, and of course the first editor that I hired, I think we fought at some point, and then I got someone else, and then so I worked with like 2-3 editors. The point is, if you really want to be a good editor, you need to understand the mindset of the director. Not every director will allow you complete judgment of what they have shot, especially when you're not there. And that's why for me, sometimes the editor from the beginning, from pre-production, will be part of the shoot. We'll read the script, we'll meet with the actors, and when we're filming, the editor will be there. So that from there, we'll be liaising, and I'll be saying, look, I'm shooting this because I actually don't want to start this edit. I don't want us to start it with the wide shot. I want us to start it with the close-up. So some of the style of editing, I start discussing with the editor on set, even while we're filming. Figuring was not really difficult, but a lot of what we did, we achieved in Nigeria. It's so important that, safety is very key. When you're working on a project and you have been assigned that role of an editor or to handle media management at the same time edit, you have to be as comfortable as possible. Even if the producer is not willing to do it, then tell them you're not going to join. Request for enough hard drives to save the materials, and request for 2 backups so that as you're capturing, you're backing up into 2 other batches of hard drives for safety reason. And keep these things, separate them and keep them in different safe location. We're gonna go into color correction and grading when we come back from this break. Color correction and grading. Well, I also would like to say that we're all color correct and we all grade, especially with the new phones that we have. All these high-tech phones that we have now. We all take pictures, and then you go and it gives you option of how to enhance the picture and how to choose different feel for the picture and how to grade it. If you want to add more red or more black, that is simply what color correction and grading is. But for film, it takes a lot more. Color correction and grading for film is an art. Is like you doing a painting. So if you don't understand art, it might be difficult for you to understand how to color correct and grade film. For a film to be well color corrected and graded, everything has to be planned, from lighting and from the camera setting. These days, if you want to shoot, you're always advised to shoot flat. It allows you the flexibility to be able to play around, the colors. And when it's flat, you will see that, okay, the real true color is not what you're seeing. And this is because when you take it to the edit, you take it to DaVinci or any of the editing software that you use or color correction software that you use, and you start applying the necessary things, then it brings out the real color and it gives you the flexibility to play around the different angles of the frame. A lot of time people will ask that, okay, look, why don't you, because I'm always saying I don't grade our films in Nigeria. By the way, Figuring was actually graded in Nigeria and was done by Soji Oshinaike. And I remember that, in fact, sometimes I sleep in the studio and we'll be there and we walk like all day, night, and all of that. And we managed, then I feel that Soji was so dedicated to being a colorist. And I saw that. He also graded Irapada. And I saw that, in him, because that is what gets me attached to, people that I work with. And I showed him, I gave him, agreed on the feel that we want. We agreed on how certain things should look, and I'll sit with him and we'll work on it together. And it came out really nice. But if you watch the subsequent films that we've done after then, the grading was a bit more advanced, compared to what we achieved with the figuring. And I'm always saying that this is not about having the gadget. This is not, even if you have all the Da Vinci's and everything in the world, if you don't understand the art of painting, because it's like you taking a canvas and taking a brush and all of that, and you want to start painting an image. That is what it is. If you don't understand lighting, then you can't understand what grading is. If you don't understand, if you don't have an idea of how and why the images were shot in a particular way, then you also shouldn't even be grading them. And that is why it's so important that when a colorist is grading, the director and the cinematographer should be there. Ideally, they should be there. And you can ask this anywhere. Even if the director is not there, the cinematographer should be there. And if the cinematographer is not there, the director should be there. Grading, like I said, is up to the director to decide, look, this is the feel I would like to have for this. When we're shooting, the director discuss it with the DOP or the cinematographer, and they agree that, look, okay, this is the palette. I want this to have a lot of black, so let's shoot it. But when I get a grade, I will enhance the black. But you have to originally lit the scene for you to be able to achieve, the exact, grading that you are looking to achieve. It is really important. So that's why in film, it's a collaborative effort. There are a lot of cinematographers who are real cinematographers, very good, and they also grade. They grade because, from the beginning, they would have ensured that everything they want to achieve with that scene is set. And then when they get to post, it's easy. These days, I see a lot of films, and of course, they're graded. But when you look at it and you compare, there's huge difference between a film that is well color corrected and graded and a film that, you just apply templates, different shades of, texture and template, and you just mix them, and it gives it a very, rich, different look. But that it's not painting. It's not great. But if people like it, and people say it's okay, and it will pass, and then Netflix will not care about where it's done, and other platforms don't care, why not? Keep doing it. But for figuring from pre-production, we decided that the 7 years before is going to have a completely different feel from the 7 years after. So if you watch the figuring, you'll see that the 7 years before was warm. It was really warm. And the 7 years after has a lot of blue. I mean, you can check it out. 7 years before was warm, and the 7 years after is more bluish, because we see them in the city and all of that. I think that will be today on Masterclass with Kunle Afolayan, from the perspective of the figuring, treating, editing, and color correction and grading. I hope you've enjoyed today's session. In the next episode, we're going to be treating something completely different. Until then, I remain Kunle Afolayan. But continue to follow our social media handles and to watch all these previous episodes, you need to follow us at CAP TV on YouTube. That is our channel, CAP, KAP TV, together on YouTube. And on Instagram, we're at CAP Television, CAP Hub, CAP Cinema, CAP Motion Pictures, and CAP Film and Television Academy. Until then, Ire.